Recently, my family were invited to my brother's wedding. It was me, my husband, our daughter, 21, and our son, 18. However, our younger son, 16, was not invited because it is a child-free wedding. I called my brother to confirm this, as I have been to child-free weddings before that had age restrictions of 13 plus or 16 plus. I explained that my son would not misbehave or require as much supervision as a younger child. My brother was apologetic, but explained that he could not make exceptions to his rule, as some of his friends have much younger kids. He did not want to appear as though he was showing favoritism by allowing my 16-year-old to attend. I understood and respected his decision since I had also had a child-free wedding before having kids. My brother has 2 children of his own from a previous marriage, aged 16 and 17. Additionally, 2 of my sister's kids are also under 18, aged 13 and 15. I assumed that none of them would be invited as well. The wedding will take place in a different country, and my family would be flying out for the weekend. My 16-year-old was a bit disappointed about not being invited, as he is close with my brother. I also did not want to leave him home alone for the weekend, so I came up with a plan. On the night of the wedding, he and his cousins could hang out in the hotel, use the pool, enjoy room service, and make a night of it. The following day, we could all explore the city together as a family, so my son wouldn't feel left out. When I shared this plan with my brother, he thought it was a great idea. However, when I told my sister, she was surprised and said that her kids had been invited. She was under the impression that it was a child-free wedding for 13-plus attendees. She had checked with my brother, who confirmed this and invited her 13-year-old niece. Both my sister and I called my brother again, and he admitted that my son was the only one under 18 in the immediate family who hadn't been invited. Despite our insistence, he refused to provide a reason for this exclusion. My sister and I have decided not to attend the wedding due to our frustration with my brother. My sister particularly loves my 16-year-old, which adds to her disappointment. Our mother is calling us both, and calling us childish for letting my brother down. My brother's soon-to-be wife is also furious with us. She claims that my brother is distraught and that my son was excluded for a good reason, but she refuses to explain further. Even my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, is upset and placing the blame on me for my sister not attending. I'm starting to feel guilty and regret that I didn't just let things be. But am I the jerk in this situation? Note, the text has been corrected for readability and clarity when spoken aloud. Some abbreviations have been expanded, such as year to year and yo to year old. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. You're not the jerk for standing up for your son, but is there any indication of what the reason could be? Has your son behaved inappropriately with anyone in the family? Caused any kind of trouble? There has to be more to the story. If he sexually harassed another family member, for example, it would be more than reasonable for him to be excluded. The reason I lean toward thinking that your brother is the jerk is that not only is he not telling you the reason, he tried to give a transparent lie. The wedding is child-free, that would have been exposed as soon as you got there and seen your 13-year-old niece. That said, there's clearly something here that you aren't telling us. Edited to update judgment after the question was answered. Comment 2. You're not the jerk. Actions have consequences, and your brother better have a damn good reason to exclude your 16-year-old son when 13-year-old and 15-year-old kids of your sister are invited. I would also not attend his wedding. It's just insane what he did without providing any reason. What did they think? That you arrive, see your sister's kids, who both are younger than yours there, and then smile and wish him all the best. Now for the update. Hey Reddit. It's been a week since I last posted about my brother's wedding drama, and boy, do I have an update for you. Buckle up, because things got pretty heated. So, after my last post, things went from bad to worse. My mom kept calling, trying to guilt-trip me into going to the wedding and bringing my sister along. She said family should stick together no matter what. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about my son being the only kid left out. Then, 2 days ago, my brother finally called. He sounded really upset and said he needed to talk to me in person. He flew out to see me the next day, which was a shock because we live a good distance apart. When he arrived, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. We sat down and he spilled everything. Turns out, his fiancée had a major issue with my son. Remember when I mentioned my son was close with my brother? Well, apparently, my brother's fiancée felt threatened by their bond. She thought my son was too influential over my brother and didn't want him at the wedding because she was afraid he'd talk my brother out of the marriage at the last minute. I was floored. My son is a sweet kid, and he'd never do something like that. But my brother's fiancée had convinced herself that my son was some sort of mastermind. My brother had been torn up about it, but went along with her wishes because he didn't want to start their marriage with a fight. After he told me all this, my brother broke down. He said he realized he'd made a huge mistake by not standing up for my son, and that he didn't want to marry someone who could be so cruel to a 16-year-old kid. He'd called off the wedding. I didn't know whether to hug him or scold him for not coming to me sooner, but seeing him so vulnerable, I just hugged him. We talked for hours, and I told him that he needed to do what was right for him, not what was easy. Meanwhile, my sister had been doing some detective work of her own. She'd talked to some of our other relatives and found out that my brother's fiancée had been spreading rumors about my son, saying he was a troublemaker. My sister was furious. She's always been protective of her nephews and nieces, and she wasn't about to let this slide. So she confronted the fiancé. It was a showdown for the ages. My sister called her out on all the lies, and the fiancé couldn't keep her story straight. She finally admitted she'd made it all up because she was jealous of how much my brother cared for my son. My brother-in-law, who had been blaming me for the whole mess, apologized after he heard the truth. He felt terrible for not believing us sooner. He and my sister are now on good terms with me again. As for my mom, she was shocked by the revelations. She apologized for pressuring us and said she was proud of us for standing our ground. She's been a rock for my brother as he deals with the fallout from the cancelled wedding. And my son? He's been a champ through all of this. When we told him what happened, he was more worried about my brother than himself. He said family is important, and he'd rather be excluded than see my brother marry someone who could be so manipulative. Now, we're all planning a family vacation together. My brother needs some time to heal, and we all need a break from the drama. We're going to that same country where the wedding was supposed to be, but this time it's going to be a fun trip. Just us, and no wedding stress. My brother's ex-fiancée has been trying to contact him, but he's not having any of it. He's realized that he deserves better, and he's focusing on mending his relationship with my son. Ex-husband left me for someone younger, and now he's dying of cancer. So kids beg me to let him move in, but I say no until he shows up with a letter of regret, and we strike a deal. My ex-husband and I had 3 children, 25-year-old female, 23-year-old female, and 22-year-old male. We separated 4 years ago after he said he was tired of seeing my old face every day and wanted to find someone younger. His words to my face when asking for divorce. The divorce was a mess. He tried in every way to take everything I had, and I even had to take on half of his debts. Long story short, I never talked to him again face to face, and we only talk through lawyers when it's something about our children. Months ago, from my children, I found out that he was diagnosed with cancer, and it is in an advanced stage. I didn't say anything more about it, because any topic related to him doesn't appeal to me. But I decided to support my children and stay by their side. Yesterday, my 3 children, all live with me, sat down with me telling me that their father could no longer work, chemo plus cancer, and wouldn't be able to stay in his current home, so he had nowhere to live, and they would like for him to live here in these last stages. I immediately said no, and that I felt offended that I had even been asked that question, knowing how much he and I dislike each other. They started to argue, saying that our house was his last option, because his relatives couldn't, and they didn't want to leave their father without a home, and that I should think about them. I asked who would take care of him when things got worse, because all 3 of them work outside the home and I work from home, or who would cover all of his financial and medical expenses. They didn't know how to answer, and that they would decide between the 3 of them to help their father and not be so burdensome for me, and that the 3 of them were willing to let their father live in our house. I said that, despite valuing their opinion on any other matter in the house, this matter is my decision alone, and it remains a no. They called me heartless, and don't think that they are just trying to give their father a place to live, not my ex-husband. And I was being petty about all the things he did, and not thinking about them. They're still pressuring me to change my mind, especially with their father only having 15 more days in his house. But I can't feel anything other than offended that they ask that, knowing how much the divorce messes with my depression and anxiety. My ex got in touch on my personal number, asking to rethink and leave the past behind just in these last moments. Funny that he asked me, but not his exes much younger than me. Am I the idiot? If you want to know, the oldest is waiting for her own house to be ready, and the two youngest are still unable to live alone. And I don't care about them still at home. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot, not at all. Your children are totally unfair to ask this of you. My ex got in touch on my personal number, asking to rethink and leave the past behind just in these last moments. Funny that he asked me, but not his ex is much younger than me. Probably because he's realized far too late that behind that old face is a good, decent person who's more beautiful than his exes will ever be. His bad. His regret to carry. Stand firm on no being a complete sentence. All the very best to you. Comment 2. Tell him he can ask his much younger and cuter exes. After all, you wouldn't want to bother him with your old face every day, not the idiot. And do your kids know how he treated you? I understand not getting involved with my parents' grievances, but as a child in that situation, I would never consider even asking my mother to care for my father if I knew how he treated her. ETA, this would be my hill to die on. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, it's been a chaotic couple of weeks since my last post, and I've got to say, a lot has happened. I never expected to be back with an update, but here we are. After I last posted, things at home got pretty tense. My kids were still pushing for their dad to move in, and I was standing my ground. It was a tough spot to be in, feeling like I was being pulled in a direction I didn't want to go. But then, something happened that I didn't see coming. My ex-husband, the same man who had been so cruel during our divorce, showed up at our doorstep. He was thinner, paler, and looked like he had aged a decade since I last saw him. He didn't come to argue or to plead his case. Instead, he came to apologize. He told me he was sorry for the pain he caused, for the harsh words and the mess of a divorce. He said he realized too late that his pursuit of something better had cost him the most important things in his life. I didn't know what to say. A part of me wanted to slam the door in his face, but another part, the part that remembered the good times before everything went sour, felt a pang of sympathy. The kids were at work, and it was just the two of us, standing awkwardly in the hallway. He didn't ask to come in, he just handed me a letter and left. In the letter, he poured out his regrets and his fears. He didn't make excuses for his behavior, but he explained how his illness had given him a lot of time to think about his life and the people he hurt. I won't lie, reading that letter was tough. It brought back a lot of memories, both good and bad. I spent the next few days in a daze, trying to process everything. My kids noticed the change in me, and we had another sit-down. This time, it was different. They shared their fears about losing their dad, and I shared the letter with them. We cried together, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were a family again, not just people living under the same roof. We made a decision together. We would let their dad move in, but it would be on our terms. We set boundaries and made it clear that this was about giving him comfort in his final days, not about rekindling any old flames. The day he moved in was surreal. The kids helped him settle into the guest room, and I busied myself with work to keep my mind off things. But as the days passed, something unexpected happened. We found a rhythm, a way to coexist peacefully. My ex-husband was weak, often too tired to do much, but he tried to help out in small ways, like folding laundry or setting the table. The kids stepped up too. They took turns taking care of their dad, managing his medications, and taking him to appointments. They even started cooking dinner more often, which was a nice change. We were all pitching in, and the house felt full of life, despite the circumstances. One evening, my ex asked to talk to me. He thanked me for letting him stay, and for the kindness I had shown him. He told me he was proud of the children we had raised together, and that he had been wrong to chase after a fantasy when he had everything he needed right in front of him. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. It was a strange moment, one I never thought I'd experience, but it brought a sense of closure, a feeling that maybe, after all the hurt, there could be a moment of peace. As the days went on, my ex's health declined rapidly. It was hard to watch, but I was grateful that he wasn't alone, that he had his children by his side. And in a way, I was grateful that I could be there too, not for him, but for my kids. They needed this, and I needed to be there for them. Son gets mad. Sister has more money, so he demands I even it out, but I say no, and his sister's friends call him out. So he works hard for a scholarship, and his first paycheck goes right into savings. When my kids were born, I opened a savings account for them, and both my mom and I put the same amount of money in there monthly. My daughter has been working since she was 12. She did little jobs around town until she was 14, and since then, she has had an actual job. She didn't touch a penny from that money and put all of it in the savings account. So obviously, she has more money than her twin. When my kids went to college, they attended the same one, but pursued different degrees. We sent them money monthly, which was enough for their basics and some extra. If they wanted anything else, they needed to take it out of their bank account. They gained access to it at 18, which is when we stopped putting money in it. My son did take some money out of his bank account, but it wasn't much. After 2 years of college, where he took at least a little out every month, there is a noticeable difference between his and his twin's accounts, especially since she got a part-time job and put about 50% of that money into the bank account. This weekend, my kids were home from college. Their college is only a 2-hour drive from us, so they're here most weekends. We were at a family dinner at my mom's when my son overheard my daughter talking with my brother about wanting to start investing. He joked about how they have so much money anyway, so it doesn't really matter now. She jokingly responded that because of his mindset, she has more money. He just made a sarcastic face and went back to his conversation. But when we went back home, he asked my daughter to see her bank account. She was obviously confused, but showed it to him anyway, and he got very mad. He was yelling so many nonsense things that I still don't even know what he said. But in the end, he told me that I need to put the difference in his account since it's not fair that she has more money than him. My daughter looked at him like he was dumb and said that she added money from her job and never took any out, and that's why she has more than him. He yelled that he didn't care and that they should have the same amount. I told him that I can't afford to pay the difference, especially as I'm paying for their college, and that if he wants more money, then he should work for it. He went red in the face and stormed to his room. He hasn't talked to any of us yet, and my daughter has told me that he won't even look at her. Even his friends have noticed that something is wrong with him and have come to ask her about it. I don't know what to do. I don't want him to distance himself from us and his friends because of this, but I can't and am not willing to pay the difference. His sister worked hard for that money, and it's not fair to her if he just gets it. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I don't know what to do. You don't do anything. This is his problem. This is a life lesson. If you work and save, you'll have more money than if you sit on your butt and spend. He also learned that you weren't put on this earth to solve all of his perceived unfairness that he'll experience in life. Not the jerk, NTA, to say no to his unreasonable request. Comment 2. You don't know what to do. It's simple. Let him have his little tantrum and ignore it like you would for a toddler. You're already paying for his college and gave him the same amount as you gave your daughter. Your son needs to learn that life won't hand him everything. This is a good place to start. Not the jerk, NTA. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support on my last post. It's been a rough week, and I've got some updates for you. So after my son stormed off about the money situation, things got pretty tense at home. My daughter, who's always been the more level-headed one, tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't budge. He was convinced that he deserved that money just as much as she did. Now, my son has always been a bit more laid back than his sister. While she was out there hustling, doing odd jobs since she was 12, he was more into his video games and hanging out with friends. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it meant he didn't have the same work ethic. My mom, who's been a rock in our family, called me up a couple of days after the blow-up. She's the one who matched my contributions to the kids' savings accounts, and she's always had a soft spot for my son. But even she was taken aback by his sense of entitlement. She told me about how when she was young, she worked 2 jobs to make ends meet, and she couldn't understand where he was coming from. The next day, my son's friends came over again. They'd been asking my daughter what was up, and she finally spilled the beans. They couldn't believe it. These guys, who've been his buddies since middle school, were shocked at how he was acting. They'd always known him as the chill, funny guy, not someone who'd throw a fit over money. One of his friends, Jake, who's been like a brother to him, pulled him aside for a heart-to-heart. Jake's family had it tough growing up, and he worked part-time jobs throughout high school to help out at home. He told my son straight up that he was out of line and that he should be proud of his sister, not jealous. Meanwhile, my daughter was dealing with her own stuff. She'd been saving up to start investing, like she mentioned at the family dinner. She'd been researching stocks, talking to advisors, really getting into it. She was making plans for her future, and this whole argument was just a distraction. A few days later, my son finally came out of his room and joined us for dinner. It was awkward, but at least he was talking. He apologized to his sister, which was a big step, but he still seemed a bit resentful, and I could tell this wasn't over. Then, the most jaw-dropping moment happened. My son got a call from his university. Turns out, he'd been selected for a scholarship he'd applied for months ago and had forgotten about. It was a decent amount of money, enough to cover a good chunk of his tuition for the next semester. You could see the realization hit him. All this time, he'd been so focused on what his sister had that he didn't see his own opportunities. He started to understand that he could make his own way, just like she did. The atmosphere at home started to improve after that. My son even started looking for a part-time job, something he'd never considered before. He wanted to make his own money, to build his own savings. As for my daughter, she made her first investment. She was nervous but excited. She'd worked hard for this, and it was finally happening. And then, justice was served in the most subtle way. My son landed a job at the local bookstore, a place he loved because he's always been a big reader. His first paycheck came in, and instead of blowing it on something frivolous, he opened up his banking app and transferred it straight into his savings account. He looked up at me with a sheepish grin and said, "Guess I'm starting to think about the future too, huh?" If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.